There are parts of the internet that you've never seen. Places where the drug cartels, chemical labs, hackers, and intelligence agencies all show up to do business. You've heard of the Silk Road and maybe even Alpha Bay, but that's just the surface. This is what happens when drugs go digital, when fentanyl is sold like Amazon Prime, and when a government pretends to shut a market down just to keep it running from the inside. Today we're diving into the darknet drugs iceberg. All real, all confirmed through law enforcement reports, leaked documents, and years of buried forum posts. From the FBI secretly operating a live fentanyl market to vendors mysteriously vanishing after cartel threats, all the way to sealed US documents admitting that they let people die to build overdose maps, this iceberg is not a theory. Be sure to subscribe for more videos like this, follow my Instagram for cool pictures of me. And I have an exciting announcement, guys. I'm actually starting a Patreon with exclusive videos that you get to choose. You get to vote on what videos I make. It's only $5 a month, that's like less than a coffee. And you get other perks like ad-free videos, early access to videos, and MP3 format. Also, you can just be a YouTube member and you get the exact same perks, just upload it on YouTube instead. And join my Discord to hang out because it's pretty fun in there. Now, let's get into this. Silk Road. Silk Road was the first huge drug marketplace on the darknet. It launched in 2011 and completely changed how people bought illegal drugs. Instead of meeting someone in person, users could now go online, browse listings, read reviews, and order drugs like they were shopping on Amazon. Everything happened on the Tor network, which helped hide people's identities, and all payments were made in Bitcoin. That made it very hard for police to track who was buying and who was selling. The site was created by Ross Ulbricht, a 26-year-old libertarian who ran it under the fake name Dread Pirate Roberts. He believed people should be free to do whatever they wanted as long as they didn't hurt others. That's why Silk Road banned CP, stolen credit cards, and anything used to attack someone. But it allowed drugs of all kind. LSD, MDMA, cocaine, heroin, weed, prescription pills, and more. The site got popular fast. Within just a few months, Silk Road was processing hundreds of orders a day. Vendors competed on product quality, stealth shipping, and customer reviews. Packages were often vacuum sealed, hidden in fake products, or disguised as regular mail. People said the service was better than most legal stores, but it wasn't bulletproof. The FBI, DEA, and other agencies quietly started tracking it. In October 2013, everything crashed. Ross was arrested inside a public library in San Francisco. Agents were literally posed up in the library waiting for him to open his laptop. And then they staged a fake argument to get him away, his attention away from it. They tackled him before he could shut the laptop. They did this because they needed him to have the site open on the screen logged in as the admin as proof. They seized the servers, which were hosted in Iceland, and found a Bitcoin wallet worth over $28 million at the time. In court, prosecutors revealed chats and journals where Ross talked about ordering hits on rivals, which may or may not have actually happened, managing vendors, and struggling to stay anonymous. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. What made the Silk Road so wild wasn't just that it worked, it was that it worked so well for years. It showed the world that the darknet wasn't just for nerds or conspiracy theorists. You could run a drug empire from your laptop. Silk Road was the blueprint for everything that came after it. Even today, every major darknet market is built on the same idea. Tor and Onion URLs. Every darknet drug market runs on something called the Tor network. Tor stands for the Onion Router, and it was originally created by the US Navy in the 1990s to help protect government communications. But now it's run by a nonprofit and anyone can use it. The basic idea is this. When you use Tor, your internet traffic gets bounced through multiple random servers all over the world. That makes it almost impossible to trace where a request really came from. It's like sending a message through 10 different strangers who each add their own layer of encryption, hence the Onion name. This system is what allows darknet sites to exist without being indexed by Google or shut down entirely. These sites use special URLs that end in .onion, which only work if you're using the Tor browser. Most darknet drug sites don't stay at one address forever. Their .onion URLs constantly change to avoid being targeted by law enforcement. Some are long strings of random letters and numbers. and newer ones can be custom and easier to remember. Because the web is constantly shifting, users rely on forums and trusted link directories, like dark.fail or dread, to find the real links. Fake markets or phishing sites are common, so getting to the correct .onion URL is part of the culture. It's like knowing the secret knock to a speakeasy. The system adds a layer of exclusivity and paranoia. You need the right tools and knowledge to just get in the door. Tor's role in darknet drug markets is foundational. Without it, there would be no such thing as hidden drug empires run by anonymous vendors. It is exactly what protects both buyers and sellers from being exposed, but it's not bulletproof. Law enforcement has caught people by attacking the endpoints, seizing servers, compromising hosting locations, or catching users when they slip up and use a real IP address by accident. Still, for millions of users and vendors, Tor has become the gateway to a world that used to require street deals and middlemen. Bitcoin as currency. Bitcoin wasn't invented for drug dealing, but that's what made it blow up. On Silk Road and every darknet market that followed, Bitcoin became the default payment system. The idea was simple. Traditional banking or PayPal would leave a paper trail, but Bitcoin, being decentralized and pseudonymous, felt invisible. When someone placed an order, they would send Bitcoin directly to the vendor's wallet, usually through an escrow system. The market would hold the funds until the buyer confirmed the package arrived and then release it to the seller. That created trust between total strangers. At the time, this was revolutionary. Regular people were buying heroin, acid, or pressed Xanax bars online, paying in crypto, and getting it shipped like an Etsy order. But here's the part people didn't realize. Bitcoin isn't actually anonymous. Every single transaction is technically recorded on the blockchain forever. What is hidden is who owns which wallet. But once one wallet gets tied to a real identity, law enforcement can follow the trail backward and forward. That's exactly how they caught vendors and buyers after big busts. One famous example is the Alpha Bay takedown, where users reused Bitcoin addresses or made careless conversions to cash. The US government has contracts with companies like Chain Analysis that specialize in tracking this stuff. Even years later, they can dig up transactions that felt safe at the moment. This is why many newer markets eventually switched to Monero, a privacy coin that actually hides transaction details. But during the golden age of Bitcoin darknet use, most people just assumed they were safe, but they really honestly weren't. No guns, no CP, no hitman rules. One thing that stood out about the Silk Road and other early markets was how they tried to draw a moral line. Ross Ulbricht said he wanted to create a free market where people could buy whatever they wanted as long as it didn't involve hurting others directly. This meant no selling weapons, no child abuse material, no stolen financial data, and no violence for hire services like hitmen. Those categories were considered off limits even among these criminals. This helped markets like Silk Road gain a weird kind of public approval. People online would argue that it made drug buying safer, cleaner, and less violent than dealing on the street. It also helped with PR. When the FBI took the site down, defenders of Silk Road claimed it actually reduced harm because it cut out cartels and street crime. But let's be real, those lines got blurry fast. Some vendors still offered forged documents, stolen PayPal accounts, and DIY weapon kits. And after Silk Road was gone, newer markets dropped the moral rules entirely. Sites like Evolution and Alphabay allowed pretty much anything, including hacking tools, stolen data, and even suspected hitman listings, though those were likely scams or honeypots. The entire ethical darknet just disappeared. But still, that original rule set is still worth remembering. It shows that Silk Road didn't want to just be a drug bazaar, it wanted to be moral and philosophical. r/darknet. Reddit played a massive role in educating and connecting darknet users. The subreddit r/darknet, and later r/darknet markets before it was banned, became the go-to spot for vendor reviews, market updates, how-tos, and scam alerts. Think of it as like Yelp for illegal marketplaces. People would post stealth photos of their packages, give detailed trip reports, and share guides on encryption, OPSEC, which stands for Operational Security, and crypto. Some users even built reputations for testing drugs and reviewing them in detail, like harm reduction influencers. If a vendor scammed someone, Reddit would know by the next day and their business would collapse. Eventually, the subreddit got too big and drew too much attention. Reddit shut down r/darknet markets in 2017 after pressure from media and law enforcement, but clones and offshoots popped up immediately. Even now, Reddit is still used to help new users navigate the constantly shifting darknet scene, especially when major markets go down or get seized. It's part of what kept the ecosystem alive. While markets come and go, the community is what holds that culture together, and Reddit, with its anonymity and reach, was the perfect place to make that happen. And with that, guys, we're done with Layer 1, so make sure you still have a glass of water and a snack as we get into Layer 2. But hopefully you don't have any illegal drugs. Market exit scams. An exit scam is when a darknet market, or sometimes just a single vendor, suddenly disappears with all the money. No warning, no refunds. This isn't a rare event, it's actually one of the most common ways that markets end. Unlike legal businesses, darknet markets have no legal pressure to shut down properly or pay people back. If the admins feel heat from law enforcement or just see an opportunity to cash out big, they'll quietly shut off escrow, block withdrawals, and vanish. One of the most famous exit scams was the Evolution market in 2015. It was considered one of the most professional markets at the time, with clean design, fast service, and strict rules against fraud. It had hundreds of vendors, thousands of buyers, and was doing millions in transactions each month. Then, overnight, it went dark. All withdrawals were frozen. The admins, known as Verto and Kimball, walked away with an estimated $12 million in Bitcoin. To this day, they were never caught and no one knows who they were. Other markets follow the same pattern. Outlaw Market in 2017, Trade Route in 2018, Empire Market in 2020. Each one collapsed suddenly with millions in escrowed funds still sitting inside. Sometimes it is an intentional scam, sometimes it's panic after a server gets compromised or someone inside flips. But either way, vendors and buyers always get screwed. That's why experienced users started treating darknet markets like temporary pop-ups, not stable platforms. You never keep coins in a market wallet longer than you need to. The golden rule became get in, get your stuff, and get out. Vendor stealth tactics. Shipping drugs through the mail sounds like it would never work, but it does. Over and over again. That's because top vendors have developed shockingly advanced stealth methods to fool customs, sniffer dogs, and x-rays. Most packages are small and look completely normal. One of the most basic tricks is vacuum sealing, usually in multiple layers to trap scent and block moisture. The outer packaging is usually something like boring or cheap, like a padded envelope or a plain cardboard box. Inside, drugs might be hidden in creative decoys. Stuffed animals, electronics, makeup kits, or hollowed out books. Sometimes vendors fake company labels or put return addresses from real businesses so the package looks like an innocent online order. The highest tier vendors go even further. Some embed drugs in wax or plastic that looks like a factory sealed product. Others wrap them in carbon paper or aluminum foil to mess with scanners. And stealth isn't just about packaging, it's about behavior. Vendors ship from random locations, rotate return addresses, and use handwriting instead of printed labels to avoid pattern detection. They also time shipments to avoid postal inspection spikes like around holidays. Some even offer stealth upgrades where for an extra fee, they'll pack your drugs in ultra-secure materials or disguise them as gifts. There are entire guides online, some written by ex-vendors, that walk through every stage of packaging from choosing the box to the type of tape to use. PGP encryption for orders. On darknet markets, every buyer and seller is vulnerable the moment they reveal any personal info. That's where PGP, which stands for Pretty Good Privacy Encryption, comes in. It's a tool that lets people send messages like shipping addresses so only the intended person can read them. It works by generating two keys. A public key, which you share, and a private key, which you keep secret. When someone sends you a message, they encrypt it using your public key, and only your private key can unlock it. On drug markets, this means you can send your real name and home address to a stranger, and if a cop seizes the message digitally, all they get is a scrambled text. Vendors post their public PGP keys on their profiles and buyers are expected to use them when placing an order. Many markets won't even allow a message without PGP encryption. Some vendors also sign their messages with their private key so customers know that they're not talking to an impersonator. is all about privacy, it's about authentication and trust. But even though it's a critical part of staying safe, a shocking number of people don't use it correctly. Some buyers forget to encrypt their addresses at all. Others use online PGP tools that leak their info to sketchy websites. There have even been busts where feds get access to decrypted messages because someone left their privacy key just sitting on their computer. Hydra market. While most people in the West were focused on sites like Silk Road or Alphabay, Hydra was quietly becoming the biggest darknet market in the world. Based in Russia, entirely in Russian and with its own set of rules. Hydra launched in 2015 and specialized in drugs, forged documents, and digital fraud tools. Unlike Western markets, Hydra didn't use the mail system. Instead, it operated with a dead drop system. Buyers paid online, then received GPS coordinates or instructions where the stash was hidden, under a rock, in a tree, or buried in a park. These drops were made by low-level runners called cladmen who worked for organized gangs and got paid per delivery. It was a fully offline method with zero need for post offices or couriers. Hydra also had insane cash-out systems. Vendors could convert Bitcoin into rubles and withdraw the money through Russian ATMs using prepaid debit cards with layers of fake IDs in between. Some reports suggested Hydra had ties to powerful criminal networks and was protected by Russian cybercrime circles. At its peak, it processed more transactions than every Western darknet market combined. But in April 2022, German authorities seized Hydra's servers and crypto wallets in a rare cross-border operation, shutting it down and freezing over $25 million worth of Bitcoin. Controlled buy operations. Law enforcement doesn't just sit back and wait for slip-ups. They actively become part of the system. One of their most common tactics is the controlled buy. That means a cop or paid informant poses as a buyer on a darknet market, places an order, and tracks the entire process. The vendor's Bitcoin wallet, the message history, the shipping label, the packaging. Once the package arrives, it's tested in a lab to confirm the drug, and then the investigation starts moving up the chain. Sometimes they let multiple buys happen to build a case. This technique was used heavily in takedowns like Alphabay and Wall Street Market, where dozens of vendors were arrested based on repeat buys and fingerprint evidence on packaging. But controlled buys aren't just to catch vendors. They're also used to flip people. If a vendor gets caught, feds might offer them a deal. Keep selling, but secretly report every address and Bitcoin wallet you receive. These cooperative vendors keep their storefronts open and active while quietly feeding intel to law enforcement. This method is rarely admitted publicly, but it's been confirmed in sealed indictments and DEA transcripts. In one case, a vendor known as Oxy Monster was caught after attending a bodybuilding competition in the US. And it turns out several of his buyers had unknowingly been part of controlled buy stings. Alright guys, we did layer 2. Let's get into layer 3. You still got that snack? Drops and reshipping networks. As darknet markets grew, so did the scale of their logistics. Small-time vendors could manage a few packages a week on their own, but high-volume operations needed entire networks to keep up. That's where drops and reshippers came in. A drop is an address used to receive packages. Sometimes it's a fake identity at a rented mailbox, sometimes it's an unsuspecting third party. Vendors often recruit random people through job ads or forums, offering them money to receive and forward parcels without telling them what's inside. These people, called reshippers or mules, think they're just handling legal goods, freelance work, or import-export coordination. But in reality, they're helping move kilos of narcotics between layers of anonymity. The real seller usually never touches the product. A supplier ships bulk drugs to a drop address, the reshipper forwards individual orders to customers, and the vendor oversees everything remotely. Sometimes there are multiple layers. One person receives the bulk, another repackages it, and a third sends it out. This way, if one link gets caught, they don't know enough to expose the rest. Law enforcement has confirmed this structure in multiple busts. In one DEA case, a woman in Illinois was paid $500 a week to receive suspicious packages and forward them to P.O. boxes across the US. She thought she was helping run an eBay store, but in reality, she was laundering fentanyl. These kinds of networks are harder to trace because the addresses are always changing and no single person controls the full chain. The vendor is shielded behind layers of people who often don't even realize they're committing felonies. Dark Ode Reborn and cybercrime forums. Not everything happens on public markets. Some of the biggest deals, highest tier connections, and serious criminal activity happens on private forums, invite-only sites where vendors, fraudsters, hackers, and traffickers connect away from the spotlight. One of the most infamous was Dark Ode, a long-running cybercrime forum taken down by the FBI in 2015. It was later rebranded as Dark Ode Reborn with tighter security and a smaller vetted membership. Entry requires vouches from known criminals, live proof of skill or inventory, and sometimes a fee paid in crypto. Inside, the forum wasn't just for drugs, it had entire sections for ransomware tools, identity theft, credit card skimming, money laundering, and advanced stealth packaging. Drug vendors used it to source bulk product, buy counterfeit shipping labels, or automate dead drop coordination. These forums operate like kind of professional black markets more than marketplaces. They include escrow services, arbitration for disputes, and multilingual sections for global distribution. Some focus specifically on fraud and digital crime, while others lean into chemical sales and logistics. Many are hosted on hidden Tor services with rotating domains, PGP-required logins, and time-limited access windows. Leaked screenshots from places like Torres Forum, Crime Network, and Verified show drug vendors comparing lab equipment, bulk buying precursors, and setting up a full-blown distribution pipeline. Law enforcement often struggles to infiltrate these forums because the screening is aggressive and constant. Even veteran Darkweb users can't get in without connections. These spaces represent the actual top of the pyramid, where Darkweb dealing stops looking like anonymous e-commerce and starts looking like global organized crime. UK and Dutch postal corruption. Some of the most drug-heavy shipping routes in the darknet ecosystem run through the UK and the Netherlands. Not just because of geography, but also because of vulnerabilities inside the postal systems. Several investigations and court cases have revealed that darknet vendors operating in these countries managed to bribe or recruit employees within their national mail services to tamper with, prioritize, or ignore packages flagged by customs. In the Netherlands, a 2019 Europol-supported operation uncovered a ring where postal workers were paid to tip off vendors about seizures, to reroute suspicious parcels, or simply wave through flagged items without further inspection. These weren't massive movie-style conspiracies. It often came down to individual workers getting paid in cash or crypto to just simply turn a blind eye. In the UK, multiple darknet vendors operated out of central hubs like London and Manchester due to the volume of international post moving through Royal Mail facilities. A 2020 sentencing report detailed a vendor who had access to unreleased tracking data and package movement logs, raising suspicions that a Royal Mail employee had been feeding them information. Even temporary manipulation of postal handling, like making sure a package skips one checkpoint or avoids drug-sniffing units, can dramatically reduce the risk of seizure. When combined with stealth packaging, these postal loopholes can turn already low-risk shipments into near certainties. While not common on a massive scale, the existence of these inside connections shows that some vendors aren't just working around the system, they're trying to embed themselves inside of it. OPSEC failures. Despite the heavy encryption, fake names, and layers of technology, most darknet drug busts don't come from high-tech crypto tracing. They come from simple human error. Operational security, or OPSEC, refers to the steps that someone takes to avoid getting caught. And the number one reason vendors or buyers go down is because they break their own rules. The most common mistake is using a real IP address. If someone logs into a market without Tor even once, that IP can be logged, subpoenaed, and linked to a home address. Another major slip is reusing usernames or email handles. People who sell drugs on the dark net sometimes have old Reddit, forum, or gaming accounts under the same name, and law enforcement scrapes those old sites for clues. There are also cases where vendors accidentally leak selfies, GPS metadata, or typed names in unencrypted messages. In one famous bust, a Canadian vendor called Always Overweight was arrested because he posted a photo of his weed jars online that included a blurry college diploma in the background. In another, a vendor's PGP encrypted welcome message accidentally included his real phone number from a previous job. These aren't high-level hacks, they're dumb mistakes, and once one mistake is made, the whole operation unravels. Federal agents will cross-reference names, old account data, shipping addresses, and even packaging materials to build a timeline. Even vendors who do everything else right can go down from 1 second of carelessness. In the darknet world, paranoia isn't just a mood, it's a survival tactic. Bitcoin dusting. Bitcoin isn't as anonymous as people once believed, and one technique that law enforcement uses to exploit this is called dusting. The idea is simple but sneaky. Agents sneak tiny amounts of Bitcoin, called dust, to wallets suspected of being involved in darknet activity. These dust transactions are worth almost nothing, usually just a few cents, but they leave a visible mark on the blockchain. When the owner of that wallet moves their coins again, the dust gets moved along with it. Blockchain analysis companies like Chainalysis can then trace where that dust ends up, sometimes linking it to an exchange or a known wallet that's been verified with a real ID. This technique is especially powerful when used against vendors. If a vendor's wallet is known or partially doxed, dusting it can help map out the addresses it connects to. In several DOJ investigations, agents use dusting to link large vendor wallets to withdrawals on KYC-compliant exchanges, like Coinbase, where identity verification is required. Even vendors who tried to clean their coins through tumblers or mixers would sometimes miss the fact that a traceable dust transaction was actually still clinging to their account. Once that trail leads to a real name, everything else, shipping records, chat logs, previous buyers, falls into place. Dusting isn't flashy, but it's one of the most effective low-cost traps in the law enforcement toolkit. And with that, guys, we're done with layer 3. That means we're about halfway through this video. So make sure you like the video if you haven't already, and subscribe if you like it so far so you can get more cool content like this. And consider subscribing to my Patreon for exclusive videos that actually you get to choose. You get to vote on what videos I make if you're a member of the Patreon. And also you get a cool little role in my Discord that lets you send GIFs in general. Anyways, let's get into layer 4. Chainalysis and blockchain forensics. Chainalysis is, again, a private company that sells blockchain tracing tools to law enforcement. They specialize in tracking Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency transactions by analyzing the public ledger, mapping out wallets, and identifying clusters of addresses that likely belong to the same person or organization. Chainalysis uses techniques like transaction graph analysis, heuristics, and known wallet labeling to trace the flow of funds from darknet markets to exchanges, gambling sites, or known vendor wallets. Once law enforcement gets a subpoena on a crypto exchange, especially ones that follow KYC or Know Your Customer laws, they can match wallet addresses to real names, phone numbers, or bank accounts. The US government, particularly agencies like the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, the DEA, and Homeland Security, have multi-million-dollar contracts with Chainalysis. These tools were used in major cases like the takedown of Alphabay and the arrest of individual vendors like we talked about earlier, Monster. The most advanced forensics now go beyond Bitcoin, tracing coins like Ethereum and even partially anonymous ones like Litecoin. Only Monero has proven consistently resistant to tracing, and even that isn't immune to metadata leaks if users make mistakes outside the blockchain. What this means in practice is that law enforcement can follow a buyer's payment from a darknet checkout all the way to their Coinbase withdrawal, often without needing to hack or intercept a single device. Hansa market takedown. In 2017, Hansa was one of the largest darknet markets in the world, handling thousands of drug transactions every day. It was known for its sleek design, multi-sig escrow system, and strong vendor base. What buyers and sellers didn't know, though, was that for an entire month, it was secretly being run by Dutch law enforcement. After Alphabay was taken offline by the FBI in July 2017, Thousands of users fled to Hansa thinking it was the safest backup. What they didn't realize was that the Dutch National Police had already seized Hansa's servers, taken control of the admin accounts, and were logging everything. Every message, every Bitcoin transaction, every IP slip-up was recorded in real time. The operation was coordinated with the FBI, who intentionally timed the Alphabet takedown to drive users directly into the Hansa trap. While under police control, the site remained fully functional. Vendors kept selling, buyers kept ordering, and packages kept going out. But behind the scenes, law enforcement was quietly collecting home addresses, fingerprinting uploaded images, tracing PGP keys, and even injecting custom malware into download links. They also modified the market's code to detect users who copy and pasted their addresses instead of encrypting them, one of the most common mistakes made by new buyers. When the trap was finally revealed, investigators announced they had gathered over 10,000 user addresses and 1,000 full vendor profiles. Dozens of follow-up arrests happened in the weeks and months after, not just in the Netherlands, but globally. Hansa is considered one of the most successful darknet stings in history, not just because of the arrest, but because it psychologically destabilized the trust that users had in darknet markets altogether. Controlled vendors. One of law enforcement's most effective long-term strategies is flipping arrested darknet vendors and turning them into informants. In confirmed cases, vendors who got caught were given a choice: cooperate or face decades in prison. Those who cooperated were allowed to keep running their vendor accounts, but now under government control. To buyers, nothing looked different. The listings were still up, and the drugs still shipped, and the feedback kept flowing. But behind the scenes, every order was being logged, every shipping address recorded, and every Bitcoin wallet traced. In some operations, law enforcement would even send the drugs themselves, using the vendor's original stash or seize narcotics from evidence lockers to maintain the illusion. This tactic was used during the takedown of the Wall Street market in 2019, where at least 2 vendors were later confirmed to be cooperating with authorities. It's also suspected in earlier markets like Alphabet, where some vendors mysteriously avoided bans after clear rule violations, suggesting that they were protected assets. The risk for buyers is massive. You could be ordering from someone who is literally working with the DEA and there's no obvious sign. Controlled vendors are also used to gather intelligence on other vendors, tracking wholesale deals, group chats, and forum memberships. In one US indictment, agents described how a flipped vendor helped build a web of connections between otherwise isolated accounts. The scariest part is that these operations often go on for months, sometimes years, while law enforcement slowly builds massive case files in the background. By the time the site goes down, they already have everything they need. Tracking postal metadata. Postal systems around the world, especially in the US and Europe, collect detailed metadata on every single package that moves through them. This includes sender and return addresses, tracking numbers, postage amounts, weights, barcodes, and in some cases even the physical location where the label was purchased or printed. While the contents of a package might be private, the metadata is not, and the law enforcement can subpoena anytime. In darknet drug cases, this data becomes gold. Investigators can analyze patterns of where vendors ship from, what packaging they use, and how often they send mail. If a vendor uses the same post office, prints similar labels, or mimics legitimate business postage styles, it all shows up in metadata. One famous case involved a vendor whose labels were printed using the same typeface and formatting as a specific shipping software. Postal investigators narrowed it down to a local post office kiosk in the vendor's area, and then used surveillance footage to mask the time of purchase with a real face. Another bust traced multiple packages with the same weight and barcode format back to a single thermal printer sold at Best Buy. Even return addresses, often fake, can give clues. If the same fake return address shows up across different states, it can be linked to a single sender. USPS also runs a program called the Mail Isolation Control and Tracking System, or MICT, which scans and photographs every letter and parcel that enters the system. It was designed for anti-terrorism, but it's used routinely in drug cases. Most vendors assume their stealth ends with a tape and box, but postal metadata turns every package into a breadcrumb trail. Virtual machine watermarks. Vendors and buyers often go out of their way to anonymize their devices, using virtual machines, burner laptops, or live booting into Tails OS to avoid leaving any traces. But even with these precautions, some slip-ups can expose everything. One way this happens is through invisible data known as metadata, especially in images. When vendors post product photos like bags of pills, bricks of cocaine, or lab setups, they sometimes forget to scrub the files. These images can contain EXIF data like GPS coordinates, timestamps, camera model, and even the name of the device owner. In some cases, the virtual machine used to edit or upload the photo leaves behind watermarks or environment signatures that reveal what kind of system was used and when. There are confirmed cases where vendors were caught because a seemingly harmless JPEG still had GPS coordinates pointing to their apartment. In another, a vendor used Photoshop inside a Windows VM, or virtual machine, and the file's metadata contained the full local username, which matched a name from a previous arrest. Some darknet forums tried to implement automatic metadata scrubbing, but it wasn't consistent. Law enforcement forensic tools like Encase and FTK can scan seized devices for fragments of edited or deleted images, even if they were never posted publicly. The danger isn't in what you upload, it's in how you made it. Vendors who don't fully understand how virtual environments work can leave behind tiny digital footprints that forensic teams use to build full profiles. And with that, guys, we're done with Layer 4. Who's excited? I know I am, personally. We're getting into Layer 5. I'm hyped. Sinaloa Cartel using darknet markets. For years, darknet drug markets were seen as dominated by tech-savvy individuals or small decentralized teams. That changed when US law enforcement began publicly linking the Sinaloa Cartel, one of the largest and most violent drug trafficking organizations in the world, to online fentanyl cells. According to DEA statements and court documents from 2018 onward, Sinaloa-linked operatives were using darknet storefronts to directly ship synthetic opioids, especially fentanyl analogs, to US buyers through the mail. In these cases, they were bypassing street-level dealers entirely. Some storefronts operated on markets like Alpha Bay and Dream Market, while others used encrypted messaging platforms or even advertised on ClearNet sites with links to .onion pages. The advantage for the cartel was scale and distance. They didn't need to smuggle bulk product across the border anymore. Just send thousands of small envelopes to scattered addresses in the US. Fentanyl's potency meant a few grams could be broken down into hundreds of doses, so each package was incredibly low risk and high reward. Several vendor accounts traced back to Sinaloa were tied to overdoses across multiple states, and in one 2020 case, federal prosecutors indicted a group of vendors in California directly affiliated with Mexican suppliers. The shift towards darknet operations showed how traditional cartels were adapting, using the same anonymity tools as independent vendors, but with far more supply, infrastructure, and reach. Synthetic drugs from China. Before China's 2019 class-wide fentanyl ban, the country was the primary source of synthetic drugs and chemical precursors used in darknet trafficking. Numerous US Department of Justice indictments and Homeland Security investigations detailed how Chinese chemical labs openly sold fentanyl, carfentanil, synthetic cannabinoids like K2 or spice, and research chemicals to both darknet vendors and individual users. These labs often advertised in English, accepted Bitcoin or Western Union, and shipped directly to the US, Europe, and Canada via standard airmail services. Some even offered customer support through email or messaging apps with bulk discounts and stealth options for high-volume buyers. In multiple cases, Chinese lab websites were listed directly in darknet forums and marketplaces. Buyers would place orders for unscheduled analogs, slightly tweaked versions of illegal substances, and receive the drugs in powder form within a week. The DEA and DHS started intercepting packages, tracing shipments back to specific labs, like Yuancheng Group in Wuhan. These investigations led to diplomatic pressure on the Chinese government, which culminated in the sweeping ban of all fentanyl analogs in 2019. After the ban, many of the original labs shut down or rebranded, moving operations underground or shifting to India and Eastern Europe. But during their peak, these labs were essentially online wholesalers, responsible for a massive share of the darknet drug supply. Nationwide surveillance deals. There have long been rumors that intelligence agencies like the NSA, GCHQ, and other Five Eyes members have access to part of the Tor network, specifically through control of exit nodes, custom Tor builds, or private de-anonymization tools. These rumors were partially confirmed through Snowden leaks and declassified documents, which showed that the NSA had budgeted resources towards, quote, tracking and anonymized internet traffic used for criminal markets. While Tor is open source and decentralized, its network depends on thousands of volunteer-operated nodes. If a government can operate or surveil enough of them, it can correlate entry and exit points over time to narrow down users. This is known as a timing correlation attack, and while difficult, it becomes more feasible with nationwide level resources. There are also suspicions, never fully confirmed, that these governments have paid for zero-day vulnerabilities in the Tor browser or deployed malicious JavaScript through hidden services to de-anonymize users. The FBI has admitted to doing this in operations like Playpen, where they infected users of a child abuse site through a legal hack known as a network investigative technique. While that case involved CSAM, the same methods could theoretically be used on darknet drug markets. Internal discussions leaked from law enforcement forums have hinted that agencies sometimes buy back-end access to market infrastructure through informants or former admins. These methods aren't used often, they're expensive, politically sensitive, and not guaranteed to work, but they show the governments aren't just playing defense. LE run exit scams. One of the darker theories in the darknet world, supported by circumstantial evidence and leaked chat logs, is that some market exit scams were not scams at all, but intelligence operations. The idea is simple. Law enforcement, or LE, infiltrates or takes over a major market, keeps it running just long enough to gather massive amounts of intel, then shuts it down and steals the remaining escrow. This accomplishes multiple things at once. It disrupts the ecosystem, causes financial damage, builds user paranoia, and funds future operations. Unlike stings like the Hansa, which were made public, these takedowns are disguised as typical exit scams. No arrest announcements, no FBI banners, just silence and missing coins. The market empire is one example often cited for this. It was one of the biggest darknet markets from 2018 to 2020, with hundreds of thousands of users and millions in escrow. It went offline suddenly in August 2020, citing technical issues, and then it vanished completely. Admins never resurfaced. Some users claimed admins had been arrested weeks earlier and the servers were quietly flipped, while others believe that the final shutdown was orchestrated to avoid panic while the market was under surveillance. Other suspected examples include Wall Street market before its public bust and the Berlusconi market, which disappeared after suspicious behavior from moderators. This theory gained traction because it's impossible to verify. If law enforcement wanted to run a fake exit scam, they'd do it exactly like a real one. Messy, fast, and unannounced. The paranoia that this creates is a tool in itself, weakening trust and driving users to make mistakes. And with that, guys, we're done with Layer 5! Layer 6, come on, let's go! Layer 6 is up next. Operation Bayonet Classified Docs. Operation Bayonet was the joint law enforcement operation that led to the simultaneous takedown of Alpha Bay and the covert hijacking of Hansa Market in July 2017. The public version of the story ends with a massive disruption of darknet activity with over 350,000 listings seized and thousands of vendors and buyers exposed. But according to multiple investigative journalists and leaked EU communications, the full scope of Bayonet may have been far more controversial. Several sealed court filings, still under protective order as of 2024, and leaked Dutch agency memos suggest that during the operation, law enforcement intentionally allowed the sale of fentanyl and fentanyl analogs to continue on Hansa while the market was under control. The goal was to trace the distribution networks and build overdose maps by correlating shipment data with local toxicology reports and fatality spikes. This strategy, while effective from an intelligence gathering standpoint, raised ethical concerns. It meant that for weeks, Dutch and US officials were operating a live market where users were unknowingly buying potentially lethal drugs from a law enforcement-run program. Internal reports referenced in Dutch media hinted that the decision to keep fentanyl listings active was debated internally but ultimately greenlit due to the, quote, public health intelligence value. This aligns with past behavior from US agencies in drug war history, where temporary tolerance or manipulation of trafficking was justified in pursuit of larger takedowns. The documents related to Bayonet's full scope remain sealed, but court transcripts confirm the existence of withheld material involving international surveillance protocols and controlled substance tracking. The operation is now cited in legal and academic circles as a rare case where passive surveillance blended into active facilitation. So, yeah. If you needed more reason to not trust the US government. Mysterious vendor, the Commission. The Commission is one of the most elusive and unsettling vendor accounts to ever appear on darknet markets. The name references the mafia term for a ruling criminal council, and the vendor's behavior matched the reputation. High-volume listings, cartel-level product variety, and near-total radio silence. First appearing on Empire Market and later seen on Torres and Dark Ode Reborn, the Commission sold everything from pure fentanyl and heroin bricks to lab-grade methamphetamine and synthetic opioids that didn't appear in drug databases. Their pricing was unusually low for the quality, often undercutting even bulk resellers. Unlike most vendors, they rarely responded to messages, never posted in forums, and didn't participate in community ratings or promotions. Despite this, they had flawless feedback and moved what appeared to be kilos of product every week. What raised alarm wasn't just the volume of pricing, it was also the geographic spread. Users across the US, Canada, Germany, and Australia reported receiving packages with identical stealth, tracking patterns, and labeling styles, suggesting a unified logistics backend. Some speculated the Commission was not a person but a syndicate or cartel proxy, using darknet markets as a side channel to liquidate overflow product or test new chemical analogs. Others believed it was a law enforcement honeypot, though no busts or takedown banners ever followed its disappearance. In late 2021, after a brief presence on a Monero-only market, the vendor vanished without warning. No messages, no scams, no exit, just gone. Multiple darknet analysts still reference the Commission as a possible proof of cartel infiltration into darknet infrastructure, bypassing the need for street-level distribution entirely. Private invite-only markets. While public darknet markets get most of the attention, many of the largest, highest value drug deals happen on invite-only marketplaces that never appear in forums. They also never appear in link aggregators or traditional Tor indexes. These platforms are designed for experienced vendors and trusted buyers only. Gaining access usually requires an existing member to vouch for you, sometimes along with proof of funds, encrypted interviews, or even live video identification to verify that you're not law enforcement. Some markets use their own custom encryption layers beyond standard PGP, requiring proprietary communication tools or specific operating systems to even view listings. Others implement kill switches, which are mechanisms that instantly wipe the site's database and logs if compromised or if a suspicious admin login is detected. These markets often specialize in wholesale-level transactions, bricks of heroin, kilograms of cocaine, industrial lab equipment, and restricted precursors. Unlike public markets, there are no ratings or open feedback systems. Trust is built through direct relationships, shipment history, and internal dispute resolution handled by encrypted third-party channels. Because of the secrecy, they're far more resilient to takedowns. Law enforcement can't infiltrate what they can't find, and even if they do, the verification processes are designed to detect fake accounts. Some invite-only sites rotate domains weekly, only go live during short windows, or require separate authentication keys for each login. Vendors here are often linked to international trafficking groups, and the buyers aren't teenagers ordering tabs, they're resellers, lab techs, or smugglers buying at a level well beyond street distribution. Vendor murder cases. The darknet drug trade might be digital, but the consequences are still very physical. Multiple vendors have been murdered over disputes tied to supply chains, territory, or suspected infiltration. In Germany, a major MDMA vendor known as Chemical Love was found dead under suspicious circumstances in 2017 after law enforcement dismantled his distribution ring. Though officially listed as suicide, investigators noted the timing coincided with massive Bitcoin seizures and internal betrayal among his co-conspirators. In Mexico, several darknet fentanyl vendors have been linked to real-world executions, especially those suspected of interfering with cartel shipments or reselling product without approval. In some cases, murders were coordinated through darknet forums themselves. One German vendor was doxxed and later attacked after being accused of stealing Bitcoin from escrow. In another case from the Netherlands, a vendor disappeared shortly after leaking private chat logs involving high-volume fentanyl suppliers. These incidents reveal that for vendors operating at high levels, the line between darknet anonymity and the real-world violence can collapse quickly. Real-world doxing for blackmail. One of the darkest shifts in darknet culture has been the rise of vendor-on-buyer blackmail, where sellers threaten to expose a buyer's identity unless they pay hush money. This usually happens after a buyer makes a mistake, like sending an unencrypted address using a personal email or posting identifiable details in a forum. Once the vendor has enough info, they threaten to leak it to family, employers, or law enforcement unless a payment, often in Monero, is made. In 2021, a Dutch buyer reportedly took his own life after being blackmailed by a vendor who had extracted shipping information from an unencrypted message. The vendor emailed the buyer's university and threatened to send a full transcript of purchases unless they paid within 24 hours. The story came out during a Dutch court proceeding involving another case, and though redacted, it matched timing and details from community warnings on archived forums. Other buyers have posted screenshots of blackmail attempts, some real, some scams, where vendors demanded additional payments weeks after a completed order. Sometimes the vendor doesn't even follow through. The goal is fast extortion with minimal risk, but the fear it creates is real. The power dynamic on the darknet assumes anonymity. When that breaks, users panic and vendors exploit that vulnerability. Some forums have started banning vendors accused of blackmail, but in invite-only spaces or Telegram channels, there's no enforcement. And then in some rare cases, even buyers have doxed vendors or threatened retaliation in return. That's the end of the iceberg, guys. Thank you so much for watching. You made it all the way to the end. Thank you, guys. I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted. I'm gonna go take a fucking walk outside, bro. So have a great night, everybody, and sweet dreams. Don't do drugs.